On a quiet grey afternoon, a silver car slowly pulls into the parking lot of a crowded shelter. In the back of one of the kennels, a German Shepherd puppy lifts his head for the first time in days. Behind the bars, he stands tall, paws planted, staring without blinking. From the vehicle, a couple steps out holding a new puppy, adjusting the leash and smiling. The abandoned pup watches every move without a sound, without a bark. The couple walks past him, not even glancing. From a distance, a volunteer points a camera and presses the button, and for a second, everything stops. Love animal stories? Then subscribe now and don't miss a thing. Thanks for following along. Now back to our story. In the dimly lit corridors of the Last Chance Animal Shelter in rural Montana, a young German Shepherd puppy named Max pressed his nose against the cold metal bars of his enclosure. His amber eyes, once vibrant with joy, now reflected a deep sadness that seemed to consume his entire being. Only 3 months ago, Max had been the cherished companion of the Andersons, a family who had welcomed him into their suburban home with open arms and loving hearts. Every morning, he had awakened to the gentle touch of 8-year-old Emily Anderson, who would sneak into the kitchen to feed him treats before her parents rose. Every evening, he had curled up beside Mr. Anderson's recliner, listening to the soothing tones of the evening news while receiving absent-minded strokes from his owner's weathered hand. That life seemed like a distant dream now. Max couldn't understand what had changed or why the Andersons had brought him to this place of concrete floors and metal cages, leaving him with nothing but a worn blue collar and the lingering scent of their home on his fur. The first few nights, he had howled until his throat was raw, certain that there had been some mistake, that they would return for him. But days turned into weeks, and his hope began to fade, like evening light surrendering to darkness. "Hey there, buddy!" Sarah Matthews, one of the shelter volunteers, knelt beside his cage. Her voice was gentle, her eyes kind behind horn-rimmed glasses. "Not feeling very sociable today, huh?" Max's tail gave a half-hearted wag. He had grown fond of Sarah during his time at the shelter. She always spoke to him as if he understood every word, and sometimes she would sit beside his cage during her lunch break, sharing bits of her sandwich and telling him about her day. But even Sarah's kindness couldn't fill the void left by the Andersons' abandonment. I know," she murmured, slipping her fingers through the bars to scratch behind his ears. "It's tough being here, but you're such a good boy, Max. Someone's going to fall in love with you soon. I just know it." Max leaned into her touch, finding momentary comfort in the contact. Around him, the shelter bustled with activity. Volunteers moved from cage to cage, feeding, cleaning, and offering brief moments of affection to the animals in their care. Other dogs barked excitedly whenever a potential adopter walked through the main doors, each one hoping to be the chosen one, to find their forever home. Max had stopped getting excited about visitors weeks ago. The first few times, he had stood at attention, tail wagging furiously, putting on his best behavior. But time after time, families had passed by his cage, pausing briefly before moving on to puppies that were smaller, cuter, or less visibly affected by their circumstances. Max had learned to temper his expectations to protect what remained of his fragile heart. Sarah stood up, brushing dog hair from her faded jeans. "We've got some people coming in today, a few families looking to adopt. Maybe one of them will be yours." She offered him an encouraging smile before continuing her rounds. Max watched her go, then settled back into his corner, resting his head on his paws. He had heard those words before. They no longer kindled the spark of hope they once had. The day proceeded like so many others before it. Families came and went, some leaving with a new companion, others promising to return after they'd had time to think. Max observed it all with detached interest, his eyes following the movements of the humans, but his heart remaining guarded. As evening approached and the shelter began to quiet down, Max heard the distinctive sound of the main doors opening once more. He lifted his head slightly, ears perking up out of habit rather than expectation, but then a scent reached him, familiar and devastating. His body tensed, every muscle suddenly alert. He knew that smell. It was embedded in his memory, in the very fabric of his being. The Andersons. Max scrambled to his feet, pressing himself against the front of his cage. His heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. They had come back for him. After all this time, they had realized their mistake. He could go home. Voices drifted down the corridor, growing louder as they approached. Mr. Anderson's deep baritone, Mrs. Anderson's melodic laughter, and the high-pitched excitement of little Emily. Max began to whine, his tail wagging so forcefully that his entire body shook with the motion. "And here are our current residents." Sarah's voice joined the familiar chorus as she led the family into view. "We have dogs of all ages and—" "Max!" Emily's exclamation cut through the shelter's ambient noise like a bell. "Daddy, look, it's Max!" Max's excitement reached a fever pitch. Emily remembered him. She was pointing at his cage, her face alight with recognition. Mr. Anderson stepped forward, his expression unreadable, and for a moment, Max thought he saw a flicker of guilt cross the man's features. "Emily, honey." Mrs. Anderson placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "We're here to find a new friend, remember? A smaller dog that can stay inside with us." Max's wagging slowed, confusion clouding his joy. A new friend? But he was their friend. He was their Max. And then he saw it. Cradled in Mrs. Anderson's arms was a tiny white ball of fluff, a Maltese puppy with a pink bow clipped to its head. The puppy yawned, revealing a perfect pink tongue, completely unaware of the devastation unfolding before it. "But can't we take Max back too?" Emily's voice had taken on a pleading quality. "He looks so sad." "We've talked about this, sweetheart." Mr. Anderson knelt to his daughter's level. "Max got too big for our apartment. Remember how the landlord said we needed a smaller dog? That's why we're getting Bella instead." Max's ears flattened against his head as the truth crashed over him. They hadn't come for him. They had come to replace him. The realization was more painful than any physical blow could have been. He pressed his paws against the bars, a low whimper escaping his throat as he stared at the family that had once been his world. Emily broke away from her parents and ran to Max's cage, tears streaming down her small face. "I'm sorry, Max," she whispered, reaching through the bars to touch his fur. "I didn't want to leave you here. I miss you so much." Sarah stood awkwardly to the side, her eyes darting between the reunited pair and the uncomfortable parents. "I didn't realize you were Max's previous owners," she said, her voice tight with barely concealed disapproval. Mrs. Anderson at least had the decency to look ashamed. "We didn't know you still had him," she murmured. "We thought he would have been adopted by now." Max barely heard the adults' conversation. His focus was entirely on Emily, on storing away every detail of her face, her scent, the feeling of her small fingers in his fur. Something told him this would be the last time he would see her. "Emily, come on. We need to finish the adoption paperwork for Bella." Mr. Anderson's voice was strained, avoiding looking directly at Max. "Can't I stay with Max a little longer?" Emily pleaded, her arms now wrapped around as much of Max as she could reach through the bars. 5 more minutes, Mrs. Anderson conceded, exchanging a look with her husband. "We'll be in the office." As the adults walked away, Emily pressed her face against the cage. "I wanted to keep you, Max. I really did. But Daddy said the apartment was too small and you were getting too big." Her words came out between hiccuping sobs. I made them promise to bring you somewhere nice. They said you'd find a better family with a big yard where you could run and play. Max licked at her tears, his own sorrow momentarily forgotten in the face of her distress. He wanted to tell her that he understood, that he forgave her, that he would be okay. But all he could do was press closer, offering what comfort he could. Through cold metal bars, behind them Sarah stood silently, a phone in her hand. Without the family noticing, she had captured the heart-wrenching scene, a child saying goodbye to her beloved pet, and a German Shepherd puppy with eyes that seemed to hold all the sadness in the world. The image would soon travel much further than anyone in that moment could possibly imagine. Sarah Matthews couldn't sleep that night. The image of Max's face, those soulful amber eyes filled with confusion and heartbreak, haunted her every time she closed her eyes. She tossed and turned in her small apartment, the gentle snores of her own rescue cat, Milo, providing little comfort. Around 3 in the morning, she reached for her phone and opened the photo she had taken at the shelter. The picture was even more powerful than she remembered. Max's paws pressed against the bars, his ears drooped, and those eyes, God, those eyes contained an ocean of emotion that needed no translation. Emily's small hands clutched at his fur through the cage, her profile showing the tears streaming down her cheeks. It was the kind of image that spoke directly to the heart, bypassing all rational thought. People need to see this, Sarah whispered to herself, stroking Milo's fur absently. With a deep breath, she opened her social media account and posted the photo with a simple caption. "This is Max. Today he watched as his family came to our shelter, not to reclaim him, but to adopt a new dog. This is the face of abandonment. This is why I volunteer." By the time Sarah arrived at the shelter the next morning, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications. What had started as a simple, heartfelt post had somehow caught fire overnight. The image had been shared thousands of times, with comments pouring in from across the country and beyond. Some expressed outrage at the Andersons, others shared their own stories of pet adoption, but all were moved by the undeniable emotion captured in that single frame. "Sarah, have you seen what's happening online?" Jason Parker, the shelter's manager, waved her into his cramped office the moment she walked through the door. His desk was cluttered with paperwork, coffee mugs, and framed photos of the many animals he'd helped place over the years. "I had no idea it would blow up like this," Sarah admitted, sinking into the chair across from him. "Is it causing problems?" "I didn't use the family's name or anything identifiable." "Problems?" Jason laughed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "Sarah, we've had 50 calls this morning already. People wanting to adopt Max, people offering to donate to the shelter, people just calling to check if he's okay." He shook his head in disbelief. "One woman from Seattle said she's driving here tomorrow. That's a 9-hour trip, just to meet him." Sarah's eyes widened. "Really? That's... wow." She hadn't anticipated this level of response. "So, you're not mad about the post?" "Mad? This is the best publicity we've had in years. If even half of those callers follow through with donations or adoptions, we could help so many more animals." Jason leaned forward, his expression growing serious. "But we need to be careful about Max. I want to make sure he goes to the right home. Not just the first person who saw his picture and got emotional." Sarah nodded, relief washing over her. "Absolutely. He deserves the best after what he's been through." Their conversation was interrupted by another volunteer poking her head into the office. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's a woman online too who says she's some big social media influencer. Says she wants to talk about doing a fundraiser for Max and the shelter." Jason and Sarah exchanged looks of surprise before Jason reached for his phone. "I'll take it. Sarah, why don't you go check on our celebrity? I think he's earned some extra attention today." Sarah made her way through the shelter, stopping to care for several animals before reaching Max's enclosure. The German Shepherd was sitting quietly in his usual corner, unaware that he had become an overnight sensation. When he saw Sarah, his tail gave a small thump against the concrete floor. "Hey there, famous boy," she cooed, opening his cage and kneeling beside him. "You've got quite a fan club forming out there." She pulled a treat from her pocket, which Max accepted gently. "Don't worry. We're going to find you the perfect home, someone who will never leave you behind." Throughout the day, Sarah watched with amazement as the shelter transformed from its usual quiet state to a hub of activity. Local news reporters arrived to interview Jason and take photos of Max. Donations began pouring in: food, blankets, toys, and money. People who had never set foot in an animal shelter before came by, some to inquire about Max specifically, others simply moved to consider adoption after seeing his story. By late afternoon, Sarah was helping a family meet a different dog when she noticed a sleek black SUV pull into the parking lot. A tall woman with immaculately styled blonde hair stepped out, designer sunglasses perched on her nose despite the overcast day. She was followed by a young man carrying professional camera equipment. "That must be the influencer," whispered Tanya, another volunteer, as she passed by with a stack of clean towels. "Brooke Wellington, she has millions of followers. Jason said she's coming to meet Max and possibly feature him on her channels." Sarah watched as Jason greeted the newcomers. At the entrance, his usual casual demeanor replaced by an eager professionalism. She couldn't hear their conversation, but she could see Jason gesturing animatedly as he led them toward the shelter's interior. Excusing herself from the family she'd been assisting, Sarah made her way to Max's enclosure, arriving just as Jason was introducing the famous visitor to their viral star. "And here he is," Jason was saying, his voice carrying the practiced enthusiasm of someone trying to make a good impression. "This is Max, our unexpected internet celebrity." Brooke Wellington removed her sunglasses, revealing sharp blue eyes that immediately softened as they fell on Max. "Oh my goodness," she breathed, kneeling down despite her expensive-looking outfit. "He's even more heartbreaking in person." Max, sensing the attention focused on him, stood up and approached the front of his cage cautiously. His tail gave a tentative wag, as if he wasn't quite sure what to make of this new person. "May I?" Brooke asked, glancing up at Jason. "Of course," he replied, quickly unlocking Max's enclosure. To Sarah's surprise, Brooke didn't hesitate to enter the cage, sitting right on the concrete floor and allowing Max to approach her at his own pace. The cameraman began recording as Max sniffed Brooke's outstretched hand, then moved closer, his body language relaxing by degrees. "Hi there, sweet boy," Brooke murmured, her voice gentler than Sarah would have expected from someone with her polished appearance. "You've had a rough time, haven't you?" Max responded by inching closer, eventually allowing Brooke to stroke his head. A small whine escaped him as he leaned into her touch. "He likes you," Sarah commented, stepping forward. "He's usually more reserved with strangers." Brooke looked up, noticing Sarah for the first time. "Are you the one who took the photo? The volunteer?" Sarah nodded, suddenly self-conscious under the influencer's intense gaze. "Thank you for sharing." "His story," Brooke said with unexpected sincerity. "Some might see it as exploiting a sad moment, but I think you've given voice to something so many shelter animals experience silently every day." She turned back to Max, who had settled beside her, his head resting against her leg. "I lost my own dog last year. Seeing Max's eyes in that photo, it was like he was feeling everything my Sophie must have felt when I had to leave her at the hospital that last time." Sarah was taken aback by the personal revelation. This wasn't the calculated PR move she had expected from someone of Brooke's. Status. I'd like to help, Brooke continued, addressing both Sarah and Jason now. Not just Max, but all the animals here. I have a platform, and I want to use it for something meaningful. She scratched behind Max's ears, earning a contented sigh from the dog. I'm thinking a fundraising campaign, maybe profiles of different animals available for adoption. I could even sponsor all adoption fees for the next month. Jason's eyes widened at the offer. That would be incredible, Ms. Wellington. Please call me Brooke, she smiled, a genuine warmth replacing her earlier polished veneer. And I'd like to start by fostering Max myself. I have a large property outside of town with plenty of space for him to run. I know I should probably just adopt him outright, but... She hesitated, a shadow crossing her features. I'm not sure I'm ready for that commitment yet, after Sophie, but I can give him a safe place while we find his perfect forever home. Sarah and Jason exchanged glances. It was an unusual request, but not unreasonable. Max would certainly be better off in a home environment than the shelter, even temporarily. We'd need to do our standard home check and paperwork, Jason said slowly. But I don't see why that wouldn't work, as long as you understand he might. Need special attention after his recent trauma. Of course, Brooke agreed readily. My schedule is flexible, and I work from home most days. He'll never be alone for long. As they discussed the details, Sarah noticed a woman standing quietly by the shelter entrance, observing their interaction with an unreadable expression. She was perhaps in her early 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and eyes that seemed to carry their own weight of sadness. Unlike the steady stream of visitors who had come through the shelter that day, she wasn't taking photos or chatting excitedly. She simply watched, her gaze fixed primarily on Max. Something about her stillness, her intensity, caught Sarah's attention. While Jason continued talking with Brooke about fostering arrangements, Sarah made her way over to the mystery woman. "Hi there," she greeted warmly. "Can I help you with anything?" The woman startled slightly, as if pulled from deep thought. "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't mean to intrude. I saw the photo online and..." She trailed off, her eyes drifting back to Max. "I just needed to see him for myself." There was something in her voice, a quiet resonance of pain that felt different from the curiosity or excitement of the day's other visitors. Sarah found herself immediately drawn to this stranger's gentle presence. "I'm Sarah," she offered, extending her hand. "I'm a volunteer here." "Claire," the woman replied, her handshake firm despite her soft demeanor. "Claire Thompson." She paused, seeming to debate whether to say more. Finally, she added, "I lost my dog recently. When I saw Max's eyes in that picture, it was like looking at a reflection of my own grief." Claire Thompson had not planned to visit the shelter that day. In fact, she had barely left her house in the weeks following the loss of her beloved golden retriever, Cooper. At 12 years old, Cooper had been her constant companion through divorce, career changes, and a cross-country move that had landed her in this small Montana town 3 years ago. His absence left a void in her modest ranch house that seemed to grow larger with each passing day. His empty food bowl, which she couldn't bring herself to put away, his favorite spot on the living room couch, the leash still hanging by the door, all silent reminders of what she had lost. When her sister had forwarded her the viral photo of Max, something inside Claire had stirred for the first time since Cooper's passing. Those amber eyes, brimming with confusion and heartbreak, had pierced straight through the protective numbness she'd wrapped around herself. Without fully understanding why, she had found herself driving to the Last Chance Animal Shelter, drawn by some inexplicable connection to a dog she had never met. Now, standing in the shelter hallway with Sarah, Claire watched as the glamorous Brooke Wellington continued to charm Max, who seemed equally taken with her. A knot formed in Claire's stomach. She had come too late. Of course, someone like Brooke, wealthy, beautiful, influential, would swoop in and claim the internet's newest sensation. What had Claire been thinking? "She's fostering him," Sarah explained, seeming to read Claire's thoughts. "Not adopting, at least not yet. She lost her own dog recently and isn't sure she's ready for a permanent commitment." Claire nodded, surprised by the wave of relief that washed over her. "I understand that feeling all too well." Sarah studied her with kind, perceptive eyes. "Would you like to meet him, Max, I mean? There's been quite a parade of people coming through today, but you seem different." Different. Claire almost smiled at that assessment. She had always been different. The quiet sister, the bookish one, the woman who preferred the company of her dog to most people. Even now, in her simple jeans and faded Montana State University sweatshirt, she felt like a shadow next to Brooke Wellington's blinding star power. "I'd like that," she admitted softly. "Though I'm not sure what I'm doing here. I don't think I'm ready for another dog either." Sarah led her toward Max's enclosure, where Brooke was now standing and brushing dog hair from her designer pants while chatting with Jason about logistics. The cameraman was packing up his equipment, apparently having captured enough footage for whatever Brooke had planned. "Brooke, this is Claire," Sarah introduced them. "She came to meet Max, too." Brooke turned, extending a manicured hand with a professional smile. "Hi, Claire. Isn't he just the sweetest? That photo broke my heart into a million pieces." Claire shook Brooke's hand, immediately feeling the gulf between their worlds. Yes, it was very moving. Brooke's phone chimed, and she glanced at it with a slight frown. "I need to take this. Business never stops, unfortunately." She flashed another smile at the group. "Jason, I'll have my assistant send over all my information for the home check. We can finalize everything tomorrow." At Jason's nod, she turned to Max, who was watching the interaction with curious eyes. "See you soon, sweet boy. We're going to get you out of here." As Brooke stepped away to take her call, Sarah opened Max's enclosure door for Claire. "Go ahead. He's had a busy day, but he's been remarkably patient with all the attention." Claire hesitated at the threshold. Suddenly, nervous, Max watched her cautiously from where he sat in the center of the small space. Unlike his eager interaction with Brooke, he made no move toward Claire, simply observing her with those soulful eyes that had captured the internet's collective heart. Taking a deep breath, Claire entered the enclosure and knelt down, not attempting to approach Max directly. Instead, she simply sat on the concrete floor, giving him space to decide. "Hi, Max," she said softly. "I'm Claire." For several long moments, Max remained where he was, his expression unreadable. Then slowly, he rose and took a few tentative steps toward her. Claire remained still, letting him lead the interaction. He sniffed her hand carefully, then her knee, and finally, in a moment that caught Claire completely off guard, he pressed his head against her chest and released a deep, shuddering sigh. Claire felt something crack open inside her, a dam of emotion she had carefully constructed since Cooper's diagnosis. Without conscious thought, her arms encircled Max's neck, and she buried her face in his fur. It didn't matter that they were strangers, that she was sitting on a cold concrete floor in a public shelter with people watching. In that moment, Max's grief and hers recognized each other, two wounded souls finding unexpected connection. "Oh," she whispered, her voice catching. "Oh, you understand, don't you?" Jason and Sarah exchanged meaningful glances as they watched the scene unfold. This wasn't the excited interaction of a potential adopter meeting a cute dog. This was something deeper, rarer, a genuine recognition between two beings who had experienced similar pain. After what felt like both an eternity and not nearly long enough, Claire gently pulled back, wiping at her eyes. Max stayed close, settling beside her, with his body pressed against her leg, as if afraid she might disappear if he lost contact. "I'm sorry," Claire said, looking up at Sarah and Jason with embarrassment. "I didn't mean to get emotional." "Don't apologize," Sarah assured her, her own eyes suspiciously bright. "That's the most responsive I've seen him with anyone since he arrived here." Claire stroked Max's head, noticing how he leaned into her touch. "When will he be going to Ms. Wellington's?" "Probably tomorrow if the home check goes well," Jason replied, watching the pair with a thoughtful expression. "She's offering him a beautiful place to stay while we find his forever home, and the publicity she'll bring to our shelter could help dozens of other animals." Claire nodded, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in her chest at the thought of leaving Max behind. What had she expected? She wasn't even looking to adopt. She had simply followed an impulse, drawn by a photograph that had somehow reflected her own pain back at her. She had no right to feel disappointed. "That's wonderful," she said, forcing enthusiasm into her voice. "He deserves a nice place to recover from everything he's been through." As Claire prepared to leave, extracting herself gently from Max's side, Sarah pulled her aside. "Would you like to leave your information, just in case things don't work out with the fostering situation, or if you'd like to visit him there? I'm sure Brooke wouldn't mind." Claire hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I'd like that." She wrote her phone number and email on the card Sarah provided, then cast one last look at Max, who was watching her departure with visible concern. "Goodbye, Max. I hope things get better for you." As Claire drove home, her mind replayed the brief but intense connection she had felt with Max. It had been unexpected, almost spiritual, as if Cooper had somehow guided her there, showing her that her capacity to love hadn't passed along with him. The thought brought both comfort and confusion. She wasn't ready for another dog. The pain of loss was still too fresh, too raw, and yet leaving Max behind had felt like tearing open a wound that had just begun to heal. Meanwhile, back at the shelter, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the stark contrast between the two women who had connected with Max that day. Brooke Wellington with her wealth, influence, and polished exterior, Claire Thompson with her quiet depth and unassuming presence. Both had experienced loss, both had been genuinely moved by Max's story, but there was something about Claire's interaction with the German shepherd that nagged at Sarah's conscience. "You're overthinking this," Jason told her as they closed up the shelter that evening. "Brooke can give Max a wonderful temporary home and help our other animals in the process. It's a win-win." "I know," Sarah sighed, pausing to give Max one last treat before heading out. "And I know we can't make adoption decisions based on gut, feelings, or emotional connections, but Claire and Max, did you see how they were together? It was like they recognized something in each other." Jason squeezed her shoulder sympathetically. "The heart wants what it wants, but we have to use our heads too. Brooke has resources, a secure property, and flexibility. She's the logical choice for fostering him right now. Besides, Claire herself said she wasn't ready for another dog." Sarah nodded reluctantly. "You're right. I just hope we're making the right decision for Max." The next morning dawned bright and clear, a beautiful Montana spring day that belied the emotional turmoil within the shelter's walls. Brooke had passed the home check with flying colors, her sprawling ranch house outside town, featuring acres of fenced land, top-of-the-line dog amenities, and a live-in housekeeper who adored animals. Everything was set for Max's departure to his temporary new home. Sarah arrived early, wanting to spend some time with Max before the transition. She found him already awake, standing at attention at the front of his enclosure, as if he sensed that something significant was about to happen. "Today's the big day, buddy," she told him, attaching a leash to his collar for their morning walk. "You're getting out of here, no more cement floors or metal bars." She led him outside to the shelter's small exercise yard, watching as he tentatively explored the space. Despite having been walked here daily during his stay, Max always acted as if each visit might be his last chance to smell the fresh air. As they made their way back inside, Sarah's phone buzzed with a notification. It was a direct message from Brooke Wellington's official account. Not to Sarah personally, but a public post featuring professionally edited footage from yesterday's shelter visit. The caption read, "Meet Max, the abandoned German Shepherd, who stole my heart. Today he comes home with me. Follow our journey as I help him heal while we search for his forever family. Rescue Dog Journey. Max, the Shepherd. Second chances." The post already had thousands of likes and comments, with Brooke's followers expressing everything from admiration for her generosity to offers to adopt Max themselves. Sarah felt a twinge of unease at seeing Max's trauma packaged so neatly for public consumption, but she reminded herself that the exposure would ultimately help not just Max, but all the animals at Last Chance. As the morning progressed, the shelter began to buzz with anticipation of Brooke's arrival. Jason had arranged for a local newspaper reporter to cover the event, hoping to capitalize on the publicity for future adoptions and donations. Volunteers who weren't even scheduled to work showed up, eager to be part of Max's big moment. Sarah was helping another dog when the shelter's front door opened. Expecting Brooke's dramatic entrance, she was surprised to see Claire Thompson instead, looking slightly out of breath and clutching a small gift bag. "Claire, we weren't expecting you," Sarah greeted her, unable to hide her surprise. Claire shifted nervously from foot to foot. "I know, I'm sorry to just show up like this. I couldn't stop thinking about Max last night and I wanted to give him something before he left." She held up the gift bag. "It's just a comfort toy. One of those heartbeat plushies that might help him adjust to his new surroundings. And a bandana that I thought might look nice on him for his social media debut." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Sarah deeply. While Brooke had offered resources and exposure, Claire had considered Max's emotional needs, his comfort, during a frightening transition. Before she could respond, however, the distinctive rumble of a luxury SUV pulling into the parking lot announced Brooke's arrival. "That must be her now," Sarah said, watching Claire's face fall slightly. "Would you like to give Max your gifts before she takes him? I'm sure he'd appreciate seeing you again." Claire nodded, grateful for Sarah's understanding. "Yes, I'd like that, if it's not too much trouble." Sarah led Claire to Max's enclosure, where the German Shepherd was watching the shelter's increased activity with wary curiosity. When he spotted Claire, his entire demeanor changed. His tail began to wag, and he rose to his feet, pressing against the cage door eagerly. "He remembers you," Sarah said softly, unlocking the enclosure. "That's a good sign." Claire knelt as Max bounded toward her, his previous hesitation completely gone. He pushed his head against her hands, his body wiggling with excitement. The transformation from the solemn, depressed dog in the viral photo to this animated creature was remarkable. "Hi there, sweet boy," Claire murmured, her hands gently stroking his fur. "I brought you something." She reached into the gift bag and pulled out a soft, plush toy shaped like a puppy with a small device inside that mimicked a heartbeat. "This might help you feel less alone in your new home." Max sniffed the toy curiously, before gently taking it from her hands and placing it on the ground beside him, as if accepting her gift but preferring her attention instead. Claire then removed a handsome blue bandana with small paw prints embroidered along the edges. "May I?" she asked, holding it up. When Max didn't object, she carefully tied it around his neck, adjusting it so it sat comfortably over his collar. "There! Now you look very handsome for your big adventure." The sound of voices in the corridor signaled Brooke's approach. Claire quickly wiped at her eyes, embarrassed to be caught emotional again. She gave Max one final hug before standing up, composing herself just as Brooke Wellington appeared at the enclosure, followed by Jason, the newspaper reporter, and her ever-present cameraman. "Oh," Brooke exclaimed, taking in the scene with surprise. "I didn't realize Max had another visitor." "This is Claire Thompson," Sarah explained quickly. She connected with Max yesterday and wanted to bring him a going-away present. Brooke's professional smile remained in place, though her eyes narrowed slightly at the sight of the bandana around Max's neck. "How thoughtful. That bandana is adorable. It'll look great in his introduction video." Claire stepped back, suddenly feeling out of place in the midst of what was clearly becoming a media event. "I should go. I just wanted to wish him well." "Actually," Brooke said, her tone carefully measured, "why don't you come along to the house? See where Max will be staying. It might give you peace of mind." The invitation caught everyone by surprise, not least Claire herself. She hesitated, uncertain of Brooke's motives, but reluctant to pass up a chance to extend her time with Max. "I wouldn't want to impose." "Not at all," Brooke insisted with a wave of her hand. "I'm planning to film Max's arrival at his new temporary home for my followers. Having someone else there who cares about him would add a nice touch, don't you think? The woman who brought him his first comfort toy meeting the woman who's fostering him. It's a beautiful story continuation." Claire looked to Sarah, who gave a subtle nod of encouragement. "All right," Claire agreed finally. "I'd like to see where he'll be staying." The next hour passed in a whirlwind of activity. Papers were signed, photos were taken for the newspaper, and Max was led out of the shelter for the first time in weeks, looking both excited and apprehensive. Claire found herself swept along in Brooke's wake, driving her modest sedan behind the influencer's luxury SUV toward the outskirts of town. Brooke's property was every bit as impressive as Jason had described. A sprawling ranch house set on at least 20 acres of land, much of it fenced for what Brooke explained had been her previous dog's play area. The house itself was a stunning blend of modern architecture and rustic Montana aesthetics, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the surrounding mountains. "Welcome to the Wellington Ranch," Brooke announced as they parked in the circular driveway. Her cameraman was already positioned to capture Max's first steps onto the property. "Let's give Max the grand tour, shall we?" Claire hung back, feeling increasingly out of place as Brooke guided Max through the immaculately landscaped grounds, narrating for the camera about all the amenities he would enjoy. The heated indoor play area for cold days, the artificial pond for summer swimming, the custom-built doghouse that was nicer than many human homes Claire had visited. "And this is where you'll sleep," Brooke was saying as they entered the house, leading Max to a plush dog bed positioned near a fireplace in what appeared to be the main living room, only the best for our special guest. Max followed along obediently, but Claire noticed that he kept looking back at her, as if making sure she was still there. When Brooke finally took a break from filming to take a business call, Claire found herself alone with Max in the enormous kitchen, where an older woman introduced as Mrs. Patel, the housekeeper, was preparing lunch. "He seems like a sweet dog," Mrs. Patel commented in a soft Indian accent as she chopped vegetables. "Much calmer than Sophie was." "Was Sophie Brooke's previous dog?" Claire asked, sitting on the floor where Max had settled against her leg, still clutching the heartbeat toy she had given him. Mrs. Patel nodded, a shadow crossing her face. "Yes, a beautiful golden retriever. Ms. Wellington was devastated when she passed away last year. Cancer, very sudden. She has not been the same since." Claire felt a pang of empathy for Brooke. Despite their obvious differences, they shared that particular pain. It's never easy losing them. "You have lost a dog too," Mrs. Patel asked perceptively. My golden retriever, Cooper. It's been a few months, but it still feels fresh. Mrs. Patel's eyes softened with understanding. The heart does not measure grief in time. She glanced toward the hallway where Brooke's voice could be heard discussing something about sponsorship rates, then lowered her voice. Ms. Wellington, she puts on a brave face for her public, but I hear her crying sometimes at night. That dog was her only true companion. The revelation added a new dimension to Claire's perception of Brooke. Behind the polished exterior and calculated social media presence was a woman still wrestling with her own grief, perhaps using Max's story as a way to process her pain while maintaining her brand. When Brooke returned, her business persona firmly back in place, she suggested they take Max for a walk around the property's perimeter to help him get acclimated. As they strolled along the fence line, Max trotting between them, Claire found herself studying Brooke with new eyes. Mrs. Patel mentioned your dog, Sophie, Claire ventured carefully. I'm sorry for your loss. Brooke's step faltered almost, imperceptibly before she regained her composure. Thank you. It was difficult. I lost my golden retriever recently too, Claire offered. Cooper, he was 12. Sophie was only 8, Brooke said after a moment, her carefully modulated voice cracking slightly. The vet said we caught it too late. There was nothing they could do. They walked in silence for several steps, an unexpected moment of genuine connection forming between them. Does it get easier? Brooke asked suddenly, her public persona slipping to reveal a vulnerability that surprised Claire. Everyone tells me it does, but I wake up every morning expecting to hear her nails on the hardwood, and when I don't... She trailed off, blinking rapidly. I don't know if easier is the right word, Claire answered honestly. Different, maybe. The sharp edges of grief become smoother over time, but I don't think we ever stop missing them. Brooke nodded, visibly pulling herself together. I'm sorry. I don't usually discuss personal matters. My followers expect a certain image. It must be exhausting, Claire observed, always being on like that. It's the price of the platform, Brooke replied with a small shrug. And the platform gives me opportunities to make a difference, like with Max and the shelter. They had reached a point where the property overlooked a small valley, the spring sunshine illuminating wildflowers beginning to bloom across the landscape. Max sat between them, seemingly content in the moment despite the uncertainty of his situation. Why did you invite me here? Claire asked finally, the question that had been nagging at her since Brooke's unexpected invitation at the shelter. Brooke considered the question, watching Max as he observed a butterfly fluttering nearby. Honestly, I saw how he responded to you yesterday. It was different from how he was with me or anyone else. There was a connection there. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I'm good at what I do, Claire. I know how to create content that moves people, that makes them feel something. But what I saw between you and Max wasn't content. It was real. I don't understand, Claire said, confusion evident in her voice. I'm not sure I do either, Brooke admitted with a small laugh, but I think Max might need more than what I can give him. I can offer him luxury, exposure, the best food and care money can buy. But you... She gestured vaguely at Claire. You offer him something else. Something authentic. Before Claire could respond, Brooke's phone chimed with yet another notification. She checked it, her expression shifting back to professional mode. My publicist needs me to approve some posts. Why don't you stay with Max while I handle this? Mrs. Patel can show you where everything is if you need anything. As Brooke walked back toward the house, Claire found herself alone with Max in the vast, beautiful landscape. He leaned against her leg, looking up at her with those soulful eyes that had captured the internet's attention. "What do you think of all this, Max?" she asked him softly. "It's quite a change from the shelter, isn't it?" Max's only response was to press closer, his warm presence both comforting and confusing to Claire. She had come to the shelter on impulse, drawn by a photograph that had somehow spoken directly to her grief. She had given Max a toy and a bandana, small tokens of care from one wounded soul to another. She had never intended to form an attachment, to find herself standing on a wealthy influencer's property, feeling strangely protective of a dog that wasn't hers. As the afternoon wore on, Claire found herself increasingly integrated into the household routine. Mrs. Patel served a lovely lunch on the patio, where Max lay contentedly at Claire's feet. Brooke flitted in and out, juggling calls and emails, while occasionally filming short clips with Max for her social media platforms. Despite the strange circumstances, Claire found herself reluctant to leave, each hour in Max's company strengthening the inexplicable bond she felt with him. It was nearly evening when Claire finally gathered her courage to announce her departure. "I should head home," she said, as she helped Mrs. Patel clear the dinner dishes. "I've imposed on your hospitality long enough." "Nonsense," Brooke replied, looking up from her laptop where she'd been editing footage. "In fact, I have a proposition for you." Claire raised an eyebrow questioningly. "Stay the night," Brooke suggested. "We have plenty of guest rooms, and it might help Max transition if you're here for his first night away from the shelter." "I couldn't possibly—" "Please," Brooke interrupted, and for a moment, her carefully constructed facade seemed to slip again. "The truth is, I'm not sure I'm ready to be alone with him yet. Having you here, it helps." The admission of vulnerability from someone who projected such confidence caught Claire off guard. She looked down at Max, who had hardly left her side all day, then back at Brooke, seeing past the glamorous exterior to the grieving woman beneath. "All right," Claire agreed quietly. "I'll stay, and tonight." As darkness fell over the Wellington Ranch, Claire found herself in a luxurious guest suite that was larger than her entire living room at home. Max had followed her naturally, seeming to assume he would be staying with her rather than in the elaborate dog bed Brooke had prepared in the living room. Neither woman had argued the point. Now, with Max curled contentedly on the plush carpet beside the bed, his heartbeat toy tucked against his side, Claire stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of the unexpected turn her life had taken in just 2 days. From isolated grief to viral photo to luxury ranch with an internet celebrity, none of it made logical sense. And yet somehow, lying here with Max's gentle breathing, the only sound in the room, it felt right in a way nothing had since Cooper's passing. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah. "How's it going at the Wellington estate? Is Max settling in okay?" Claire typed back, "Better than expected. I'm actually staying the night to help with his transition. It's complicated." Sarah's response came quickly. "Life usually is. Trust your instincts. Max certainly seems to trust his where you're concerned. Trust your instincts." Claire set her phone aside, those 3 words echoing in her mind as she drifted towards sleep. Her last conscious thought was wondering what her instincts were trying to tell her about Max, about Brooke, and about the unexpected path her life seemed to be taking. Claire awoke to the unfamiliar sensation of warm breath against her hand. Opening her eyes, she found Max standing beside the bed, his amber eyes fixed on her face with an expression of patient expectation. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the guest suite, illuminating dust motes that danced in the golden beams. For a moment, disorientation washed over her, the luxurious surroundings a stark contrast to her modest ranch house on the outskirts of town. "Good morning to you too," she murmured, reaching out to stroke Max's head. His tail wagged in response, the motion more confident than it had been at the shelter. Just one night in a real home with people who cared about him had already begun to transform him. A soft knock at the door preceded Mrs. Patel's voice. "Miss Claire, breakfast is ready whenever you are, and I put out some food for Max as well." "Thank you. We'll be right down," Claire called back, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. She had slept in her clothes, not having packed for an overnight stay, and now she ran her fingers through her tangled hair in a futile attempt to make herself presentable. Max followed close at her heels as she made her way downstairs, the layout of the sprawling house still confusing to her. The smell of coffee and something delicious baking guided her to the kitchen, where she found Mrs. Patel arranging freshly baked scones on a cooling rack. "Good morning," the housekeeper greeted her warmly. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months, actually," Claire admitted, surprised by the truth of it. "Where's Brooke?" "Ms. Wellington rises early. She's in her studio doing her morning live stream for her followers." Mrs. Patel gestured toward a hallway Claire hadn't explored the previous day. She asked not to be disturbed until she finishes at 9. Claire checked her watch, just past 7. "I should probably head home soon anyway. I need to change clothes, and I have work to catch up on." She ran a small bookkeeping business from home, and yesterday's impromptu visit to the shelter and subsequent overnight stay had put her behind on several client projects. "At least have some breakfast." "First," Mrs. Patel insisted, placing a steaming mug of coffee before her, "and Max seems to be enjoying his." Claire glanced over to where Max was enthusiastically devouring his breakfast from a ceramic bowl painted with his name. A detail that made Claire wonder if Brooke had arranged it overnight or if it had been prepared for her previous dog, Sophie. As they ate breakfast on the patio, watching the morning mist lift from the surrounding mountains, Claire found herself torn between the peace of the moment and the knowledge that she needed to extract herself from this situation. Max wasn't her dog. This wasn't her home. The connection she felt with him, powerful as it was, didn't change the reality that Brooke Wellington was his foster parent now, with resources and influence Claire could never hope to match. "I should write Brooke a thank you note and get going," Claire said finally, rising from the table. "Would you have some paper I could use?" Mrs. Patel nodded, leading her back inside to a small desk in the corner of the kitchen where she kept stationery for household correspondence. As Claire penned a brief note expressing her gratitude for Brooke's hospitality, Max settled at her feet, his body pressed against her legs, as if afraid she might disappear. "You'll be fine here, sweet boy," she whispered to him, trying to convince herself as much as him. "Brooke will take good care of you until they find your forever home." Max's ears perked up at her voice, his head tilting in that distinctly canine expression of inquiry. Claire felt her resolve weakening under that amber gaze, but steeled herself. She couldn't adopt a dog right now. Her grief for Cooper was still too raw, her life too unsettled. Max deserved someone who could give him their whole heart, not just the broken pieces of hers. She was just sealing the envelope when Brooke appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking impossibly put together in yoga pants and a cashmere sweater despite the early hour. "You're leaving?" Brooke asked, noticing Claire's car keys in her hand. "I need to get home," Claire explained, handing her the note which now seemed redundant. "Thank you for your hospitality. It was unexpected, but appreciated." Brooke accepted the envelope with a small frown. "Max has really taken to you." As if to emphasize the point, Max pressed himself against Claire's leg, looking up at Brooke with an expression that seemed almost pleading. "He'll adjust," Claire said, the words catching slightly in her throat. "Dogs are resilient. More resilient than people sometimes," Brooke agreed with a rueful smile. She hesitated, then continued. "Listen, I've been thinking, what if we tried a different arrangement? Claire raised an eyebrow questioningly. "I'm not home as much as I'd like to be," Brooke explained. "Even when I'm physically here, I'm often working, calls, meetings, filming. Max needs more attention than I can give him consistently. I'm sure Mrs. Patel is wonderful, but has a full-time job maintaining this place," Brooke finished for her. "What if you help me with Max? Co-fostering, if you will. You could come here during the day while I'm working, or even take him to your place sometimes. It would give him stability with two people who care about him, and frankly, it would help me too." Claire blinked in surprise. "Co-fostering? Is that even a thing?" "It is if we say it is," Brooke replied with a shrug. "The shelter just wants what's best for Max, and based on how he's responded to both of us, I think this could work." Claire looked down at Max, who seemed to be following the conversation with intense interest, his gaze moving between the two women. The proposal was unconventional, certainly, but then nothing about this situation had followed a conventional path. "I work from home," Claire said slowly, considering the logistics. "I suppose I could bring my laptop here some days, or have him at my place when you're particularly busy." "Exactly," Brooke nodded, warming to the idea. "And it gives you a chance to see if you might be ready for another dog without the full commitment of adoption right away. We'd be helping each other." There was something in Brooke's expression of vulnerability beneath the confident proposal that resonated with Claire. Despite their vastly different lifestyles and personalities, they shared the experience of loss, of having loved and lost a canine companion. Perhaps that shared understanding was exactly what Max needed. Two people who could appreciate his grief because they carried their own. "Let me think about it," Claire said finally. "I need to go home and change, catch up on some work. But I'll call you later today." "Perfect," Brooke agreed, relief evident in her voice. "And don't worry about Max. We'll be fine for a few hours, won't we, boy?" Max looked less convinced, his eyes following Claire as she gathered her things and moved toward the door. At the threshold, she knelt to give him one last pat, whispering a promise to return soon. It wasn't until she was in her car, driving down the long driveway, that she allowed herself to acknowledge how much she already missed his presence beside her. The day passed in a blur of client spreadsheets and emails, though Claire found her thoughts repeatedly drifting to Max and the unusual arrangement Brooke had proposed. By late afternoon, having caught up on her most pressing work, she found herself calling Sarah at the shelter for advice. "Co-fostering," Sarah repeated after Claire explained the situation. "That's creative. But if both of you are on board, and Max is comfortable, I don't see why it couldn't work. It's not like there's a rule book for these things. But is it fair to Max, going back and forth between two different homes?" "Dogs are adaptable," Sarah assured her. "And from what you've told me, he's formed attachments to both of you. Having two people who care about him is better than being in the shelter, that's for sure." After hanging up, Claire sat on her porch. Swing, the same spot where she and Cooper had spent countless evenings watching the sunset over the distant mountains. The memory brought a familiar ache, but for the first time, it was accompanied by something else, a sense of possibility, of life continuing beyond loss. Before she could overthink it, she picked up her phone and called Brooke. "I'll do it," she said when Brooke answered. "The co-fostering arrangement. Let's try it and see how it goes." "Wonderful!" Brooke's genuine enthusiasm came through clearly. "Max will be thrilled. He's been moping around all day looking for you." They worked out a tentative schedule. Claire would come to the ranch 3 days a week, and Max would stay at her house for 2. Weekends would be flexible, depending on Brooke's often unpredictable work commitments. It was unconventional, perhaps even a bit ridiculous, but as Claire drove back to the Wellington Ranch that evening with an overnight bag and her laptop, she felt lighter than she had in months. The weeks that followed settled into an unexpected rhythm. Claire found herself spending more time at the ranch than initially planned, often working from Brooke's sun-drenched office while Max dozed at her feet. Brooke, for her part, seemed genuinely relieved to have someone sharing the responsibility of Max's care, especially on days when her professional obligations demanded her full attention. More surprising was the friendship that gradually developed between the two women. Despite their obvious differences, Brooke's polished confidence contrasting with Claire's quiet introspection, they discovered common ground beyond their shared affection for Max. Both were fiercely independent, dedicated to their respective careers, and navigating life's challenges without partners or close family nearby. Their conversations, initially centered around Max's care and progress, expanded to include their personal histories, professional aspirations, and even tentative discussions of their experiences with grief. "I never posted about Sophie's passing," Brooke confessed one evening as they sat on her patio, watching Max explore the garden in the fading light. "My followers knew I had a dog who sometimes appeared in my content, and then suddenly she didn't. A few people asked, but I just couldn't put it into words for public consumption." Claire nodded, understanding the reluctance to expose such private pain to strangers. "When Cooper passed, I barely told anyone. It felt like speaking it aloud would make it more real somehow." "Exactly," Brooke agreed, swirling her wine thoughtfully. "Which is why Max's story hit me so hard. That photo Sarah took, his grief was so raw, so visible. It reflected everything I couldn't express about losing Sophie." Max chose that moment to return to them, settling at their feet with a contented sigh. His transformation over the past weeks had been remarkable. His coat now gleamed with health, his eyes bright and alert, his body language relaxed and confident. The depressed, withdrawn dog from the shelter was barely recognizable in this vibrant, affectionate animal who had, against all odds, found not one, but two people to love him. It was during one of Max's stays at Claire's modest ranch house that an unexpected visitor arrived. Claire was working at her kitchen table, Max dozing in a patch of sunlight nearby, when a knock at the door roused them both. Max's ears perked up, but he showed none of the anxiety that had characterized his earlier reactions to strangers. Opening the door, Claire was surprised to find a man in his early 40s standing on her porch, an expensive camera hanging around his neck and a friendly smile on his face. "Claire Thompson?" he asked, extending his hand. "I'm Daniel Mercer. Brooke Wellington gave me your address. I hope I'm not intruding." "Daniel Mercer," Claire repeated, recognition dawning. "The photographer? I've seen your work in Montana Living." Daniel's smile widened. "That's me. May I come in? I'd like to talk to you about Max." Over coffee at her kitchen table, Daniel explained his interest. He had seen Brooke's posts about Max and had been moved by the story. "I'm working on a series called Second Chances," he explained, his eyes lighting up with passion for his project. "Portraits of rescue animals and their humans, capturing the bond that forms when both have experienced loss. Brooke thought you and Max might be interested in participating." "Me?" Claire asked, surprised. "But Brooke is the one fostering him." Officially, Daniel smiled, glancing at Max, who had settled his head on Claire's foot under the table. "Brooke tells me it's a bit more complicated than that. A co-fostering situation, which honestly makes it even more interesting from a narrative perspective." The photography session took place the following weekend on Claire's property, with Brooke joining them for part of the shoot. Daniel worked with quiet intensity, capturing candid moments between Max and both women, Max and Claire walking along the creek that bordered her property, Max and Brooke playing fetch in the open field, the three of them together on Claire's porch swing. "These are extraordinary," Daniel murmured, reviewing the images on his camera. There's something special happening. Here, the way Max connects with both of you, but differently. With Brooke, he's playful, almost performing. With you, Claire, he's grounded, at peace. As Daniel packed up his equipment, he hesitated, then said, "I'd like to showcase these at my upcoming exhibition in Bozeman next month. It's a benefit for animal rescue organizations across the state. Would that be all right with both of you?" Brooke, ever conscious of positive publicity, readily agreed. Claire was more hesitant, unaccustomed to such public exposure, but the thought of helping other animals like Max eventually won her over. The night of the exhibition arrived more quickly than Claire anticipated. She found herself standing in the gallery, uncomfortable in a dress she rarely wore, watching as Bozeman's art enthusiasts and animal lovers mingled around Daniel's powerful photographs. Max's story, presented in a series of stunning images, accompanied by text explaining his journey from abandonment to his unique co-fostering arrangement, had become the centerpiece of the exhibition. "Your dog's story is remarkable," a woman commented to Claire as they both stood before a particularly moving photograph of Max looking up at Claire, his eyes reflecting absolute trust. "It's so unusual, the arrangement you and Ms. Wellington have. How did you decide who would eventually adopt him permanently?" The question caught Claire off guard. In the weeks of co-fostering, neither she nor Brooke had raised the subject of permanent adoption. Their arrangement, initially intended as temporary, had evolved into something that felt increasingly permanent, without either woman acknowledging it directly. "We haven't quite figured that out yet," Claire admitted, her eyes seeking Brooke across the crowded gallery. Their gazes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition that this question would need to be addressed sooner rather than later. Later that evening, after the exhibition had wound down and Max had been appropriately admired by dozens of attendees, Claire, Brooke, and Daniel sat in a quiet corner of the gallery, sharing a bottle of champagne. To Max, Daniel proposed a toast, raising his glass. "And to the extraordinary journey he's taken you both on." "To Max," the women echoed, their glasses clinking softly. After a comfortable silence, Brooke set her glass down and turned to Claire. "I think it's time we talk about what happens next." Claire nodded, her heart tightening. "I've been thinking the same thing." "The fostering arrangement was always meant to be temporary," Brooke continued, her voice carefully measured, "until Max was ready for his forever home." "And he is now," Claire agreed softly, looking at Max, who lay contentedly at their feet, secure in the presence of both his humans. He's come so far from that sad dog in the shelter photo. Daniel, sensing the gravity of the conversation, discreetly excused himself, leaving the two women to face the inevitable decision that had been looming over their unusual arrangement. "I think we both know what needs to happen," Brooke said after a moment, her usual confidence giving way to a rare vulnerability. "I've been watching you with him, Claire. The way he looks at you, the way he settles when you're near. As much as I care about him, I think his heart has chosen." Claire stared at her in surprise. "Brooke, no. Your home is amazing, acres of space, every comfort a dog could want. And your platform has helped so many other animals at the shelter through Max's story." "Those things matter," Brooke acknowledged with a small smile. "But they're not everything. Max needs consistency, stability, someone whose life revolves more around him than around conference calls and content creation." Before Claire could respond, Daniel returned, an excited gleam in his eyes. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I've just had the most incredible idea. The response to Max's story tonight has been overwhelming. People are genuinely moved, not just by his journey, but by your unconventional solution to helping him heal." He set his camera on the table, scrolling through some of the images he'd captured that night. What if this isn't about choosing at all? What if Max's forever home includes both of you? What are you suggesting? Brooke asked. Her professional interest piqued. A sanctuary, Daniel said simply. Not just for Max, but for other animals like him. Combining Brooke's resources and platform with Claire's day-to-day presence and connection. A place where abandoned animals can heal while awaiting adoption, or in some cases, live out their lives if adoption isn't possible. The idea hung in the air between them, unexpected yet somehow perfect. Claire looked at Brooke, seeing her own surprise reflected back. My property has more land than I know what to do with, Brooke said slowly, the concept taking shape in her mind. And with my platform, we could raise significant funds, bring attention to animal abandonment. And I could manage the daily operations, Claire continued, the possibilities unfolding before her. My bookkeeping business is flexible, and I've been wanting to do something more meaningful. Max, sensing the shift in energy, sat up and looked between the two women, his tail beginning to wag as if he understood that something momentous was happening. Max's second chance sanctuary, Daniel suggested, his photographer's eye already envisioning the potential, where every abandoned animal gets the same opportunity Max did, to heal, to be loved, to find hope again. In that moment, surrounded by images that told the story of a journey from abandonment to belonging, Claire felt the last pieces of her grief-hardened heart begin to soften. Cooper would always hold a special place there, just as Sophie would for Brooke. But Max had shown them both that love wasn't finite, that hearts could expand to embrace new beginnings without betraying what came before. I think, Claire said, reaching down to stroke Max's head, that this is exactly what was meant to happen all along, from the moment Sarah took that photo, through all the unexpected turns, to this moment right here. Brooke's hand joined Claire's on Max's fur, the German Shepherd leaning into both their touches with contented bliss. I think you're right. This isn't the ending to Max's story. It's just the beginning. 6 months later, Claire stood on the newly constructed observation deck overlooking what was now, officially, Max's second chance sanctuary. The former Wellington Ranch had been transformed, additional fenced areas created for dogs of different sizes and temperaments, a state-of-the-art veterinary clinic installed in what had once been Brooke's studio, comfortable cabins built for volunteers and potential adopters to stay while getting to know the animals. Max, now the official ambassador of the sanctuary, trotted beside Claire as she conducted a tour for potential donors, his blue bandana, the same one Claire had given him on his first day leaving the shelter, now emblazoned with the sanctuary's logo. His story, captured in Daniel's powerful photographs, which now lined the sanctuary's welcome center, had inspired not only substantial donations, but a waiting list of volunteers eager to help with the dozens of animals now in their care. Brooke approached, having just finished a live stream showcasing 2 recently rescued puppies who were already responding well to the sanctuary's rehabilitative environment. The response is incredible, she said, her eyes bright with purpose. We've already received adoption applications for 3 of the new arrivals. Claire smiled, watching as Max greeted Brooke with the same enthusiasm he always showed, his journey from abandoned shelter dog to beloved companion and inspiration complete. What had begun as a viral photo capturing a moment of heartbreak had transformed into something neither woman could have imagined, a partnership built on shared purpose, a sanctuary offering second chances, and a family formed not through traditional bonds, but through the healing power of compassion. As the Montana Sunset painted the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Claire thought about the long, winding path that had led them here. From the depths of grief, both Max's and their own, had emerged something beautiful and enduring. The sanctuary stood as living proof that endings could become beginnings, that loss could lead to discovery, and that sometimes the most broken hearts were precisely the ones most capable of healing others. Ready to head home? Brooke asked as the last visitors departed, the three of them standing together on the deck as darkness began to fall. Home, Claire repeated, the word encompassing so much more than a physical place. She looked down at Max, who gazed back with eyes no longer filled with sadness, but with the calm contentment of a dog who knew without doubt that he was exactly where he belonged. Yes, I think we're ready. Dear listeners, we hope that Max's journey from abandonment to finding a new purpose has touched your hearts. For more emotionally captivating stories like this one, we've prepared a special playlist with equally moving narratives. You can find it by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring unique stories that explore life's complexities and the healing power of connection. Don't miss our upcoming content, and we look forward to reading your thoughts in the comments section below.